and legal remedies found that there is a need to take a comprehensive approach in combating anti-Semitism, which entails much closer collaboration in all aspects of law enforcement and the judiciary. Officials at every level, police, prosecutors, judges, and lawmakers, all need to be trained on all aspects in the fight against anti-Semitism. It is a matter of political will. We've got to do it, not just talk about it. Parliamentarians have a particular responsibility to use their strategic positions for greater oversight, whether it be public inquiries, oversight hearings, or just conversations with what we would call the executive branch, but those who run the agencies constantly doing checks and balances. And then also, besides a lack of understanding in the phenomenon of anti-Semitism, there's a question of resources. Often it all comes down to funding. You state what you really care about by how much money you allocate to it, and if the money's not there, it speaks volumes of the lack of commitment. With regards to policing, we talked about training. We've got to have more training. Several of our distinguished experts noted that the LEOP under the OSCE, what a great loss to have that law enforcement to law enforcement training capability cease to exist because of lack of funding and because of lack of political will. My hope is, as Ken Stern said so well, if we do nothing, let's make sure we reconstitute that very, very important asset that has been lost in the last couple of years. Sharing of intelligence is critical. Networking or networks among law enforcement must be developed at all levels. Just like we do in the anti-terror effort, we need to do it because there are parallels, obviously. We need to do it in the anti-Semitism fight. Law enforcement agencies often lack units specially trained to deal with these kinds of crimes. We need strike forces and men and women, particularly in law enforcement, who really know what they're dealing with, and then, of course, they can train others and inspire others. Spikes in anti-Semitic incidents can, to an extent, be predictable in reaction to developments internationally. Vigilance on the part of law enforcement can be key in actually preventing incidents. As things are unfolding in the Middle East, there are harbingers there. There's clear indications. It's like knowing when a storm is coming. We need to be very alert and very vigilant to what may happen shortly thereafter. With regards to prosecution, the legal framework needs to be clear in terms of crimes relating to anti-Semitism, and as Michael Wine pointed out so eloquently, ambiguity is an impediment to prosecution. Some countries, Iran for example, are not only state sponsors of terrorism, but serve as safe havens, harboring those responsible for heinous acts. Tougher laws that are enforced. You can have a law if it's not enforced, what good is it? Tough laws that are enforced draw a bright line in the sand. Criminal behavior that goes unpenalized leads to replication and impunity. And tough laws that are enforced can have a chilling effect on potential crimes. Conclusions: training is critically needed. Clarity is needed in order for police to correctly identify anti-Semitic acts. And we need to collect accurate data. Often there are no standards on reporting of these crimes. Standardizing the methodology for data collection is needed at all levels within countries. There's an urgent need to bridge that gap on data. As Andy Baker and Rabbi Baker said earlier today, and it was said in our meeting, the OSCE's Berlin Declaration, which couldn't be more clear about the state responsibility. And, you know, if you're not part of the OSCE, those principles obviously are universal. They really apply to every one of us. We've got to get data generated. If you can't fight something if you don't know the who, what, when, where, why of it, so data collection is important. It was pointed out that some Jewish NGOs bridge that gap. Michael Wine made that point, to which I would note that may be good on the interim, but frankly this needs to be institutionalized, especially so our law enforcement assets. Yes, it's good to have the Jewish groups doing the great work that they do, but it ought to be ancillary. It ought to be in addition to, not in lieu of, the important work that governments are supposed to do. Finally, on the bus this morning to our first session, Professor Gil Troy, the chair of the International Education at McGill University, said something that was very timely, a very timely observation. He noted that 35 years ago yesterday, November 10th, UN Resolution 3379 was agreed to by the United Nations, 72 to 35 with 32 abstentions. That infamous resolution equated Zionism with racism. It is the only resolution that has ever been revoked. You'll recall it was revoked in 1991. But at the time, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was our ambassador to the UN, said so brilliantly, "The United States rises to declare before the General Assembly of the UN and before the world that it does not acknowledge, it will not abide by, it will never acquiesce to this infamous act." And it occurred to me just a few moments ago that perhaps the new anti-Semitism isn't so new. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much.